Uh, yes, it could be. Obviously, a Rajas person is outgoing, active, also externally active. But introverted people I'm an introvert, although you wouldn't think so. Sitting here teaching yoga. But I think introvert is not so much a tamas issue, but more a sattva issue. You become very reflective, and because of that you turn your attention inwards. That is the result of sattva.
Some people are painfully shy, introverted.
That is tamas. Painfully shy. What is shyness? Shyness is fear. In essence, it's fear. And fear is a tamas issue. I think just a normally introverted person, you don't notice anything disturbing. With a painfully shy person, you have a very awkward feeling because that person's shyness, which appears to be introverted, because the person doesn't speak, doesn't express themselves. But it comes with a very strong tension, which you don't see if introversion is caused by sattva and leads to introspection, observation. Then it is actually pleasant to be with such a quiet person. So there are different qualifications, basically. But I've never seen a Rajas person being introverted.
You're introverted yet you are recharged by being alone.
Right, that's what I said. There are different qualifications in terms of introversion. It can be surrounded by a field of tension, and it can be very peaceful. So either sattva or tamas, but not rajas. Okay, we have a repetition of the yin-yang model. Ajita's invention, kind of, or insight. It is a refresher. Which, in the model, basically the human being, the framework of the human being is reflected in terms of yin-yang models. It starts with a big egg, which contains all your whole being. This is basically your aura. You have not manifested into matter, into a physical body yet. So maybe you remember that everything is made out of energy due to the process. Due to the process of condensation, energy manifests more and more into solid matter. The physical body is the end product of that. But you're not just a physical body, you are various bodies. And starting with the aura effect, Purusha we called it before. It then condensates into a more dense form. So this becomes the next body within the aura, within Purusha. That is called Avyakta. I'm pretty sure you have notes of that from the basic course. And you can also find it in the booklet I sent you. In Purusha. Avyakta. Purusha is your divinity. Purusha is basically descending from the universal consciousness or the universal soul. That splits up into individual souls that eventually become you as a person. So Purusha, you can call that your soul. Avyakta is a little bit a difficult concept, as you remember, maybe. We, in English, translate Avyakta as the unmanifested self. So, divinity or soul is subject to condensation, the process of the downfall, resulting in the next body in line, which is Avyakta. Avyakta is the unmanifested self. So it is, I've asked Ajita also told me that he has asked other people, authorities in yoga. The answer was, well, this is such a vague concept, I wouldn't even want to try to explain it. I have until now given that answer each time too, until last course. And then I came to the conclusion that your consciousness is starting to take shape in this stage. But it hasn't taken on a distinct form yet. It doesn't have any distinct qualities or personal traits, characteristics yet. Therefore, it is called unmanifested self. A self with a capital S. What follows, logically, is of course the manifested self. Manifested self is called Atman. Atman is self with a capital S, manifested. However, manifested means that it is expressing itself. Maybe when you were a child, indeed, it manifested itself, but as a child you were not developed yet, so your characteristics had not had a chance to develop. And along the way, most people growing into adulthood actually totally lose connection with self, becoming more and more occupied with material matters. It's all the way down the line. Condensation has taken root, so to speak, and people are only concerned mainly, it's a generalization of course, but with material the material side of life. As a child, you have no such limitation yet, but the limitation a child is dealing with is that it hasn't had time and experience to manifest. So it's there, it's manifested, but it hasn't had time to mature and express itself. As yogis, and actually all people in the world kind of have a holy duty to come back to self. Soul consciousness. Many people in the world that we live in a world, if you compare it to the past, if you look at the history of mankind, we live in a world that has never been so safe as it is now. Now I know when I say this, many people's neck hairs stand up straight and they say, oh, what the hell, and here is something going wrong and there is something going wrong. That is true, there are still wars and there is still bloodshed and atrocities going on. But if you look at it without emotion, and just compare with how the world was 100, 200,000, 10,000 years ago, the world hasn't been as safe ever before in the history of mankind. This has led to the possibility of people to prosper. Our physical basic needs are fulfilled. We have a roof over our head. We have 3 meals on the table a day. We even have room for some luxury and comfort. This is all very nice, but people don't have to fight for survival anymore. There's a luxury problem. But what happens now? People who have to fight for survival have no room for spirituality. You just live day by day, taking care of yourself and your loved ones, trying to be safe, remain safe, and trying to have food on the table at least once a day. This is all being taken care of. All the basic needs are being taken care of, including safety, security, stability, etc. The situation now occurs that we have this luxury, we have this room, comfort, and we start to look around us. We have room now to look around us. What shall I do? What do I want? But because we are not trained to look to subtle things, we have no idea yet about the spiritual world, about the spiritual needs. We look only at gross level. And we see maybe the neon sign of a Thai restaurant and we think, yeah, I have some money in my pocket. I'm going to have a really nice meal today and I don't even have to wash dishes. You buy a house maybe, or you rent a house. If you can afford it, a little bit bigger than the one you had before. Maybe you go on a nice vacation and you have a nice microwave in your house or a nice computer, what have you. You fulfill also your material needs, which are real. There's nothing wrong with fulfilling material needs. Many people in the society that we live in, adults, I'm talking about adults, not children, have all their needs met, all their needs fulfilled, and then they find there is a hole in their heart. They feel that there is something more. There must be something more. And they don't know how to fulfill that. This is, of course, a generalization. There are plenty of people who do have their own ways to fulfill it. Volunteering is a very effective form of finding fulfillment. For example, But people on a lower level of consciousness try to fulfill that hole in their heart by going on a nice vacation, buying a nice car. And there is nothing wrong with these kind of things. But in terms of fulfillment, they are very short-lived. So what you see in Holland, because Holland is, in terms of that kind of stability I'm describing here, a little bit ahead of Korea. People in Holland are super comfortable. They work 8 hours a day. They're diligent at their work. And while working, they just came back from a nice vacation to Sri Lanka or so, because these days they don't go to southern France anymore. It has to be more outrageous and more. Everybody tries to outdo the other colleagues in the office. So people go on very exotic, abandoned vacations, abandoned places. So they just came back from Sri Lanka, had a month of wonderful trips and experiences and adventures and so on. The moment they start working in the office again, of course they start working, but in every spare moment they have, they already search the internet for their next adventure, next year, or 6 months later, in the winter or in the summer. Can you see the picture? This is a modern form of slavery. Slavery in which you are paid actually, and you are kept motivated with the promise of this money with which you can buy fulfillment. So people are very steady, stable, happy, diligent workers, motivated, but they are focusing all their attention on material things. They follow fashion, they have the newest boots, Uggs or so, or Timberland, or they have the newest iPhone or Galaxy S23 or so. Oh, it's just up to 4 right now, isn't it? Well, 23 will come soon. Anyway, people lose themselves basically in those kind of things, and they're very busy with it. This is one of the complaints of people who are sensitive, that this world is so unsensitive. Because people are so busy with all those material things, so superficial, so on the surface. They still have a hole in their heart, but they constantly keep plugging the gap with their next vacation, with their next new gadget, with their next new car. Every 2 years there is a new car in the driveway, just a little bit bigger and more luxurious than the previous one. People are diligently working and in the meantime educating themselves a little by little, paid for by the company. They get a promotion now and then, earn a little bit more money, etc. Every time people come back to this issue, there is this hole in their heart. People are looking for the purpose of this all. Those people who are sensitive, more sensitive than the average person, they eventually start looking in the direction of, for example, the practice of yoga, spirituality. What is really lacking in people is Atman. What is really lacking in people is self with a capital S, soul consciousness. Soul consciousness is being in touch with yourself. And when you are in touch with yourself, you will find what you really want in this life, what you really need to do in this life. The heart opens up. You start feeling attracted to a certain issue in life. I'm pretty certain that this has all happened already in all of you. It's probably one of the reasons why you are here. But it takes years to fulfill. In my case, for example, it started with a yoga book. And I started practicing yoga. That awoke all kinds of things inside me, and the next thing I felt attracted to was martial arts in general. Searching the yellow pages, I found a Hapkido gym, and I started practicing there. This was only the process, because I had a vague idea of what I needed, and I started to fulfill those needs. But that was still far from Atman. But it brought me to Korea. And while here, I continued Hapkido practice, training, and I started teaching yoga little by little. And slowly but certainly, it became like a snowball that started rolling and became bigger and bigger. And in that way, I found the plug, the permanent plug to the hole in my heart, which is sharing. Sharing, you can call it yoga, but it is just sharing my experiences passionately with other people, people who are open to listen, in order to enlighten, in order to help you move forward in life, in order to help you plug the hole in your heart, in order to help you to find Atman. And everything else that went before, including Hapkido, has totally no significance anymore. It has significance in the sense that I had to go through that path, but I'm not interested anymore at all. In spite of all the effort, all the sweat, all the time, it was just a means. I also know this is not the end station, but it is a huge... I'm always working with my heart. Very clear during the summer, 6 weeks or so, when I'm not teaching anymore on Saturday, Sunday, I kind of slowly lose my way. To the point that I'm thinking, shall I organize a workshop or so? Even for free, if just because it will make me be connected again. Atman, soul connection, everybody has, I should say, a right to actually rediscover that. As a child, Atman is present in you. You are Atman. I don't know if you see this when you look at children, or when you remember yourself when you were a little child. The children are not polluted yet. Children are not conditioned yet. Depends a little bit on the parents. At some point they lose their pure condition. But children are Atman, but not manifested yet. They haven't had a chance yet, like I said just before. Growing up, you lose connection. Yoga is the way to reconnect again. Come back to Atman again. And I know that among you, many of you already have had a chance. And especially those of you who have done the advanced course already and are here again. I know that you have found what you're looking for. At least you have a quite clear picture. And you're still in the process of putting the details together and the preparations to build your future life on it. How do you come to soul consciousness? How do you come to soul consciousness? Your most important tool is actually just silence. Stop being busy. Stop thinking. Stop being busy physically and mentally. Silence. Because it is in the silence that you sharpen your senses, and when the senses sharpen, you eventually touch upon soul consciousness, upon Atman. Atman is very subtle and is discovered by those people who turn their attention inwards. But it is a long process. Every time you feel a little bit more. Now it is not that simple, because the human being is subject to the downfall. This is one of your how do you call the condition of evaporation? How do you call the thin air high up in the mountains? Just thin air? What did you say? Yeah, I know. In Dutch we have a very distinct word for it. But this is just pure energy. You're not manifested into bone, muscle, and tissues. Transitive? Yeah, that's not the word I'm looking for. But because we are subject to the process of downfall, we don't even have consciousness here. You all have at least already some because of your yoga practice. So I said, it's very simple. Silence will lead you to Atman. That is true, but not wholly true. Because if you are a complacent person, if you keep yourself only busy with material things, your consciousness will never reach to this level. You know that your consciousness is below the diaphragm. Generalization, of course, but anyway, it is at least within the boundaries of your physical body. The center of gravity of your consciousness is there. So silence is one of your biggest tools, but you need to do some effort. You need to reverse that process of downfall. Your energy has to rise up again against the condensation, against the process of the downfall, the tamas that is natural for all life in this world. And that is, of course, yoga. All the exercises in yoga are designed to build sattva, which is fueled by rajas, and that will let your consciousness rise to higher levels. You do that through concentration, which is standing still. You do that through meditation. In meditation, concentration, meditation, you persistently focus your attention, which is energy, in the center of your head, in nada. So you pull, again and again, you pull the energy away from lower consciousness, from the lower emotions and desires, to the higher emotions and desires, the heart, the throat, more and more here, until you connect with the crown. This persistent work of you practicing yoga leads to the shifting of the center of your consciousness, the center of gravity of your consciousness, to shift from below the diaphragm to eventually above the throat. And that consciousness in Ajna Chakra and the crown, that is leading you to the discovery of your heart's content, soul consciousness. When you understand this also, you will never ever be interested anymore in all that yoga that is offered out there by people who know nothing about yoga, who know nothing about life, just are good with their body, teaching some yoga, teaching some physical exercise, I should say. Shouldn't even use the word yoga. Yoga is so much more beautiful if you look at it. So, within Atman we have the causal body. Within the causal body we have the mental body. Causal body is crown chakra. That is the subtle body, or subtle is better than mental, but it is the same. Causal is spiritual body. The subtle body. So you see a continuation here of the condensation of energy. It becomes denser and denser. Subtle body, causal body is not yet manifesting into any physical matter, but in the subtle body you have the brain, you have intellect, mental activity. So subtle body is mental, which is Ajna chakra, and within the subtle body you have, of course, the physical body, which is the gross body, which is physical.
Is the crown chakra in the causal body?
Yeah, causal body is crown chakra.
I was wondering at what point is the individual separated from Lucia and might just continue along that track where we left off in the last.
Say again, the last sentence. Speak a little bit louder.
I was wondering at which point here are you separated and your chakra where you left off, your development is restored. So,
Wait, the answer will come. You can continue this, basically you can continue this model into eternity, both on this side as well as on that side. If you continue this model on this side, going bigger, you end up in the universe, literally. Here, you end up in Muladhara chakra, but even below Muladhara chakra, you could just continue with the yin-yang model, and you end up in the microcosmos. To make this a little bit visual, I gave you this link to the powers of 10, in which they start on a beach and they go into, with a power of 10 each time, they go farther and farther away into space first, into the universe, and then they reverse it, they go back to the beach, and then they start zooming in on, for example, the hand of that person lying there. And in the end, you see that both are in fact the same. So, wait, your head is here. Your physical body is here. So up until gross body is considered to be up until the lowest 5 chakras, up until the throat chakra, including the throat. So you continue this model within Ajna chakra. You then have Vishuddhi chakra, the throat. Bless you. You then have Anahata, the heart. You then have Manipura. You then have Svadhisthana. And you then have Muladhara chakra. So I don't know if this answers your question, Ben, but as a baby, when you're born, you are in fact whole. But you start manifesting into a physical body at that point. So in the beginning, this is all intact. But it has not matured. And before it can actually fully mature, there are so many influences during your upbringing, your education, living in this material world, the gross world, the world of matter or prakriti. So many influences that basically you collapse. Your consciousness collapses down until basically the lowest level, the level of your fears and sexuality, to the level of animal life. Just sheer basic existence. That is a kind of a radical way of putting it, but you have just totally no connection anymore there, because your perception is too coarse.
My question was, I guess, put it in a different way. If somebody is Rajas and they die or reincarnated,
They die and reincarnate, okay?
now would they be born again as somebody who is Rajas?
That depends. That depends. If when you live your life, you have all kinds of desires to fulfill. Also material desires. When you die with unfulfilled desires, you will reincarnate in such a condition that you are basically ready to fulfill those desires in the next life. If you can see this happening. Not everybody believes in reincarnation, but you can see this happening in just in one lifetime. If you look at the success stories of very, very successful people, extremely successful people, most of them were actually born in poverty. Being born in poverty, they compare themselves with the wealthy surroundings, of which they are not part, but they were born in that society. And if they have a strong character, they will have a very strong desire to become rich. That is just a very natural process, and very natural, a very logical thing to happen actually. So you have different kinds of people, and there are only few people who have the qualities to actually to have the discipline to follow that desire and materialize it, and that is where the success stories come from. There are other people lacking the strength, the spirit maybe, they will just start pointing at other people and they will say this society is not fair and I am poor and they are rich and it's not fair. Not understanding that it is their own, basically it could be their own choice. If only they choose, they could achieve anything they wanted in their lives if only they put their heart into it. So, if, you know, you have this law, the Darwinian law that the strongest survive. That is applicable here too. People who are actually really strong, they have this strong desire they can't deny, and they fulfill their desires and their ambitions. This has nothing to do with spirituality. This is purely, in first instance, this is purely physical fulfillment, gross fulfillment, material. But that does lead to stepping higher onto the ladder towards divinity. Can you follow that?
Yeah, I think so. At what level would this person who has unfulfilled desires be separated from Purusha and these characteristics packaged in some sort of way?
Say again?
I know that, we experience that, well, I don't believe that children are born as blank slates. So I was wondering that
They are not.
theoretically here, would they be separated from the soul of the universe and have their own characteristics?
Yeah, all children are born with their own characteristics. And as a parent, if you understand that, you try to let them grow up finding their own way. But they need structure. They need some form of education if you want them to give them a good chance to live in this society successfully. But you try to avoid training them army style, trying to impose your desire upon them. For example, I want you to be a bookkeeper, so you plan out your child's education in the direction of becoming a bookkeeper. I have actually nephews who were, they are all bookkeepers because their mom wanted them to become bookkeepers because her brothers are also bookkeepers. And so all these guys are bookkeepers. It's really interesting. But that is not for the well-being of your child. Maybe they are well off financially, but they've never found what they're looking for. They don't even know. And they're satisfied with their wealth, kind of complacent. If you look at it in terms from how we approach spirituality, how we approach life and fulfillment, those people basically live this life not progressing much on the path of evolution, and when they pass away they just have to come back again, and maybe hopefully they will do better next life. But if you find your dharma in this life, this soul connection, you make soul connection, you find what you think is really important, which you can do with passion, compassion. You make huge steps forward in your evolution. If I in Hinduism, Buddhism, yoga, it is said that you must live 1,000,000 lives. Starting from the most primitive form of life up to the highest form of divinity. So you have to live through 1,000,000 lives to end the cycle of reincarnation before finally your spirit can rest or go up into higher spheres and not having to manifest into physical body anymore and suffer through this valley of tears, which life on earth in a body kind of is considered to be. So what you see happening, and maybe you can recognize this if you look at family members or so, especially those who really don't understand what you are doing with yoga and don't want to understand it. But actually what you can see is that people are born, grow up, grow old, and die again without actually making much progress. This explains why people need to go through reincarnation 1,000,000 times. So don't pin me down on this 1,000,000 times. It could be 999.999. But many, many lives. Why do they have to go through so many lives? Out of ignorance. So they also, Hinduism, Buddhism, yoga, they also say, once you reach that point where you elevate your consciousness, you shorten these 1,000,000 lives enormously. Because once you reach that level of spirituality, enlightenment, where you become connected with the universal source of wisdom that provides you with insights, that provides you with soul connection, your dharma, you start very rapidly fulfilling so many things you haven't fulfilled in 800,000 lives before. Just in one lifetime. And then maybe you have to live a couple of lives more where you refine that. And then you reach eternal life, basically. Then you reach the point that you do not have to manifest into physical body anymore. Can you follow this?
Yeah. Okay, so my question was, I guess, kind of going back to what you said earlier about Avyakta.
Yeah.
And what did you say you had discovered about that? And
Avyakta is the unmanifested self, where Purusha, which is pure, which is universal soul, in fact. You can say Purusha is universal soul, Atman is personal soul. Avyakta is the intermediate stage of transformation of the splitting up from the universal intelligence, splitting up and becoming you, becoming self. Yeah? Avyakta, I'm doing an attempt to explain it, but all the people I've asked have just denied even trying. But that is what I realized. That is the best I can do in putting it into words.
yeah, that's what I was going for.
Okay. But to continue the story I was telling, to make this practically understandable or visible, if you compare yourself with the people who are not on this path of consciousness, you see a very distinct difference. I have explained it before. I don't know in the basic course or advanced course, but you will see at some point that although you practice yoga, you have relative control, you feel even calm and peaceful, but you notice that you're kind of a volcano with a huge amount of magma bubbling inside. I called it inherently unstable. The yogi is inherently unstable. because you are so full of energy. But because you are a yogi, you have learned to canalize it. You have your tools. You have your control tools. Yoga is your control tool. The people around you are dead volcanoes. There is no burning magma inside. We call it magma? The stuff that flows out and flows down the mountain, down the crater. So just in practical terms, what you see is that you, being inherently unstable but able to canalize and control your enormous amount of energy, basically, Kundalini, you are constantly on the move. Calm and controlled as you seem to be on the surface, you're constantly transforming, constantly growing, constantly changing. It is a very slow process, but if you compare last year with now, you see enormous change. If you compare 10 years ago with now, you see even 10 times more change. You recognize this? You look at other people who are not on this path, and that's the majority of the people. The only thing you see changing is that they get a little bit older every time. 5 years later, 10 years later, they just got a little bit older. Maybe they did get a little bit promotion or so, they did buy a little bit bigger car, they did move to another town maybe with a nicer house and a better environment. But really in terms of growth, this kind of growth that we're talking about, fulfillment, they're standing still. Which means they have to come back. If you don't learn your lesson in this life, you have to come back next life. And if you are too comfortable in this life, you may have a lot of misery in next life, just to teach you. But this is really how it works. So being so dynamic, always on the move, you probably remember I've said many times, because people ask me, what, you teach only one class in the morning in the weekdays? Wow, then what do you do the rest of the day? I always say, I do nothing. And you don't believe it. But outwardly, I'm not doing much. I walk my dog and go to the supermarket and wash some dishes or so. But inwardly, there is a whole universe at work, bustling and bubbling and full of energy, and constantly on the move. And that is what leads to these transformations and to these developments and growth. So as a human being impatient, and you compare yesterday with today, you don't see anything. And as a human being seeing yourself every day, it is even for you maybe difficult to see the difference between last year and now, a year later. But if you look more objectively, you see that many things have changed, that enormous changes have taken place, while other people overall just stand relatively still. There are always some changes, of course, but very marginal. Can you follow that? Look at yourself, compare yourself with 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Also look at yourself, compare yourself with the people around you.
When you're talking about having that extra energy, the volcano, whatever, the fiery thing.
Yeah.
Is that like a change that happens? Because I have noticed in the last 3 months that I feel anger comes so much quicker like that, but I don't act on it. But it's something that before it would have bothered me, but I would have just kind of kept it down, and now I'm a lot more, I can feel it more. I don't have more conflicts, but happen so much quicker. I just wonder if that's
I would rather say that you should investigate what you are holding back. I think there is time to throw off your old skin and adapt a new skin like some snakes do, but you're holding it back. Maybe it's time to move on
it's not so much about
and not giving in to that inner need to change, which presents itself as something very subtle, so often difficult to recognize. But it presents itself, if you don't give in to it, if you do not see it or recognize it, it leads to frustration and restlessness and unfulfillment. At some point, it's time to move on. The problem that you bump into here is, of course, although you are a sentient human being, much more than before, although you have elevated your consciousness to higher levels, much more than before, you continue to function as a human being. And big changes in life confront you with fear. And that is where people often get stuck. Sometimes you just have to push through certain changes. Why am I saying this? Because that anger must come from somewhere. The circumstance you end up in that trigger the anger, they're not the cause of the anger. Because in other circumstances, in another time, you would not react like that. You wouldn't feel that anger rising in you. So there must be another cause behind it that leads to that anger rising up in you. It's frustration. Something is crying out to be fulfilled, but it is subtle, and because you're still functioning as a human being, and you always will, you need to overcome the fear of change, because fear is scary, or change is scary, and always will be. But as a spiritual being, so having said that, as a spiritual being, you do have the power to rise above your fear. And this happens especially in your moments of meditation, in your moments of reflection, contemplation, where you really connect with your heart, with Atman. When you connect, you feel the fear down there, and it's almost like a cocky feeling. You have that feeling of confidence. And that fear is there, it is real, but you say, you just know deep in your heart, and that is where this expression comes from. You know deep in your heart where you are going, and you know deep in your heart that it will all work out well. And that gives you the courage and the power to overcome those obstacles and deal with the fear. The anger should tell you something about there is something under your skin. Yeah?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Question two.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. There were several. Go ahead first. Right.
I remember in the reading somewhere, you talk about, I don't know, life or something starts not at birth but at conception. So I can't find it right now, but can you say where conception is that division between Atman and Abhikata? When the actual ego is
Oh, that is very interesting. You are adding to my realization. I have to think about this a little bit more, but you just turned on the light inside. Conception, that must be taking place here somewhere. I think. I have to contemplate on this a little bit. I have to think about this a little bit. But it's a good one.
What is yours?
That's conception.
Hey,
Yeah, we're
He's only interested in conception. Dirty old man.
Okay, I have one more question.
Yeah.
The head is drawn like I don't know. Does that represent like the physical head or like just like the intellect and mental activity? Because it's above the gross. It's above the gross and physical body.
Yeah,
I don't
so-
know if that.
Yeah, but listen, but in yoga, the physical body, the skin, the bones are actually not considered. When we talk of the gross body, you talk about the 5 chakras between the root and the throat. So the head, physically, it's your physical body. But in terms of yoga, it is the subtle body because it's the field of energy where the mind is functioning and the intellect is functioning.
So the gross body, like the physical body, is that on there? That would it be below or like
In this model, the physical body is not considered. And actually, frankly, there is no serious yoga book where the physical body is actually mentioned. It always talks in terms of energy and energy bodies.
Because the physical is not physical is a concept. It's a perception. It's not a reality in the sense of ultimate reality, right? It is just
Yeah.
the way the mind interprets energetic patterns.
Yeah, you can put it that way, but in terms of yoga philosophy, the body is just a necessary evil that you descended in to work out your dharma. So it's just, yeah, it's kind of, you know, in the Bible you have the story of Adam and Eve falling out of paradise. Our embodiment into our physical body is actually Adam and Eve having fallen from paradise. We were pure spirits before, without physical body, and due to what we call fasana, subtle desire, we have then fallen out of paradise and started manifesting into physical body, and now we're in the arduous process of going back up there. We're trying to make paradise again, come back to paradise again. You had a question? Heidi? You can talk with Brian. Maybe something interesting comes out of it. Yeah. That's yeah.
So when we talk about someone's aura, I'm a little confused. That's a different aura?
Your aura, yeah, that is Atman.
That's
Yeah, that must be Atman.
okay.
Because this is everything around you. And within that Purusha, you have many auras. We are all auras within that Purusha.
So we're all Purusha.
Yes. And the goal of spirituality or spiritual practice, the exercises that we do, the studies that we do to understand our deeper functioning, actually it's all designed to just go back up into that universal soul again, that universal consciousness. In the meantime, if this sounds too far-fetched, just enjoy, because yoga is just a wonderful path to walk. Everything makes sense. Everything is common sense. Life starts making sense in the process of pursuing this, and whether you go back to the universal consciousness or not, let's just do our best and make the best out of it for ourselves and automatically for those around us. And the world will become a better place. And life is wonderful. Once you are on this path, once you understand what it's all about. And you know, like these days you have all these expressions you find on Facebook and so on, life wisdom and so on. And the end goal is not important. Whatever it is that you try to achieve, the end goal is not important. It's the path that leads towards it. Can you follow this? I have gone through that process very consciously because I thought, I have taught this in the previous advanced course, but not in the basic course, I think, not yet. I was like other people, doing my best, thinking that one day when everything is established, you can just sit on your laurels. You know the expression, sitting on your laurels? Just enjoy your comfort. You build something up, a business or whatever, and then you just enjoy doing nothing anymore because it's there, and but it doesn't work. The end goal is, of course, that it is established. It is the path that leads to it that is so interesting, so challenging, so instructive, leading to so many developments, transformations, growth, wise lessons. The moment that you arrive there, if you do have the capacity to actually sit on your laurels, some people of course do, but I think spiritual people cannot. But if you have that capacity, you basically just grow old and grow big. You won't move anymore, just enjoy all the pleasant things of life. But as a spiritual person, you may enjoy for a little while your vacation, you're sitting on your laurels, but very soon you will start to itch. You want another challenge that will present you with another path that leads up there. It never ends. But the next challenge will build upon what you have achieved before that, so you will grow bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm not talking in terms of your wallet, but more in terms of your ability. Your influence becomes bigger and bigger on society with the things that you do.
So about that, before you had the success that you have here, like, or whatever, before this was the way it is now, could you foresee certain things happening? Because I feel like there's certain things where I have a feeling that I know what's going to come out of something.
Yesterday I listened to an interview with Oprah Winfrey.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But she said she knew that she was going to be famous.
No, not necessarily famous, but she knew that she was going to be grand.
Yeah.
She felt this inherent capacity to do something beyond, to do something extraordinary, to do something special, to become big and influential. And another thing that she said is, she said, I never thought about the money. It's totally not important. As a child, I had a dream and I had a vision, and I had this feeling also of, you cannot explain this, and especially as a child, you have no idea. But I've always had that I've always been a dreamer. I've always had that feeling that I will do great things. And this has led to incredible frustration, even self-destruction, almost. Because where do you start? And when I started, when my life turned around and I started making conscious choices, stay away from certain things that are not constructive, and focus more on things that I really want, against the odds, that feeling became stronger and stronger because of yoga. It rose basically to the surface of my conscious awareness. And that's frustrating even more, because there's so much that you want to do, but it hasn't manifested yet. And the only way to approach that is continue that road. Prepare yourself for what you think you need to fulfill that end goal. So I went to school and I learned economics and business administration, because one of the part of my vision was I have to be independent. I want to do something with people. I didn't know exactly yet in what kind of form, but I practiced Hapkido and I thought maybe I can do something with kids. Maybe I can do something with people, healthcare, yoga. I laid the foundation, and the rest is basically a process that took place. When you're ready, the next step will reveal itself to you. If you try to seek it, if you try to force it, it just leads to frustration. You get stuck. If you take care, God helps only those who help themselves. If you take care of the foundation, the rest, at the right time, the right place, you will meet the right person, and things will just take off. And the interesting thing about this approach is, first, of course, you must be very patient and diligently continue doing what you have to do. The other thing that you need to do is take care of the fundamentals, because if you have no knowledge and you have no technique and you have nothing, your dreams just remain dreams, soap bubbles. So if you prepare yourself and you remain committed, things will start to move when the time is right. And you know what I do still and always continue to do? In the deepest misery, I don't sit down and feel miserable. I put my foot down and I keep going, knowing that there will come a time that it will turn around, that my presence of mind and body is going to be required. So whatever happens, also since 1.5 years, 2 years ago, after my Korean study, I was not so busy anymore. Everything became stable and steady. I don't enjoy that. I keep doing my own exercises every morning. I keep making long walks on the riverside. I just make sure that the foundation remains firm. And that is also the foundation for your spiritual development. Discipline, really, what we need to fulfill all this is discipline. So on various occasions in basic course and advanced course, I have said, yoga is not for the faint-hearted. It is, if you were not tough before, you will become tough as a result of your yoga practice. And this is something that goes totally against what the impression that other people have of yoga. Unless, of course, you practice Bikram yoga or any other form of incredibly physically challenging yoga. People think yoga that is for weak people. Like the people at the gym here, especially men. They don't come to class because they think it's for women, thinking that women are weak. I tell you, the women here coming to yoga class, they're really scary. You don't want to mess with them. Yeah.
Which did happen to me, and I thought about it, and I was like, is this something because it was presented to me that inherently means that I'm ready for it? And so I was going to almost force days later, I just realized like I'm not ready for that. So how do you like reconcile that? I guess like I didn't know if I was making the right choice. Do
Well-
I force myself because it presented itself, or do I wait until I feel more confident?
You know, we all make mistakes. We are human.
Yeah.
And the way that we talk about yoga, philosophy, life, and so on, we have only our limited way of talking about it, but the nuance is difficult to reflect. And life is actually very complicated, very subtle, very complicated. So you do make mistakes. Sometimes you indeed think that a good opportunity presents itself and it's time to grab that. But you are just human. And you do function with lower desires and emotions. So when it goes wrong, just investigate. And you will see that you violated one of the yamas or niyamas. You will see that you were gripped by desire, maybe. Or you were driven by fear of missing the boat. And when lower emotions or desires interfere, it can lead indeed to making the wrong decision, thinking that something of a higher order was happening.
I did say no. It's an opportunity.
You did or
I
didn't?
was ready. I just am not ready.
But don't be scared to take chances.
Yeah, well, it's a fine line. That's what I was struggling with. It's like, do I push myself or do I wait a little longer? But I chose to wait and thought, after I made the decision, it feels like the right decision. So I'm just going with that for now.
Yeah. You know, if I had been opportunistic, and I am opportunistic, but if I had been really opportunistic, I had jumped onto that commercialization boom in Korea and maybe earned a lot of money in just 2 years' time or so, and then closed my school again because nobody's interested anymore. I couldn't do that. I started teaching yoga here before anybody knew of yoga. And, well, I've been trained in real yoga and I'm too sensitive and too conscientious to compromise. So while the commercialization boom of yoga took place, I continued to train myself with the help of Ajita, also through the internet. We had also courses going on, and I just kept developing those handouts, those materials, and translating Ajita's books. I just kept working. Because I saw the larger picture and I thought about the future, not about the moment. So while other people were flourishing, I sacrificed my most important day of the week to practice with Ajita, to study with Ajita. The money that students paid, I sent to Holland. Well, usually that was the day that at least helped me to pay the rent and other bills. That was in Itaewon. So I looked at the bigger picture and kept looking at it and following my conscience also. Whatever it is that you do, you from now on, because you are too sensitive and too conscientious, always want the best. I wanted the best for my students. And I knew that I wasn't good enough yet, so and it's never good enough, but I just needed to do that. And as a result, I'm still here. While many other yoga studios have closed. And I was visited by a guy from a yoga organization with 90 yoga schools under him, very ambitious guy. He contacted the IYF and after that he contacted me. He kind of wants to work with me, wants me to become part of his organization because he, well, obviously if he goes through the IYF, he has to go through me anyway. I'm the Korean representative of IYF. This guy just at some point he said, wow, you are a person who has been involved in yoga, who has been teaching yoga the longest among all yoga teachers I've ever met. And I've only been teaching 17 years. Normally that isn't that long. But in terms of Korea, that's very long because nobody else has been involved in yoga for so long. Many people just drop out because their motive is not pure. Their end goal is money. So they fail. In the end, they all fail. You know, Brian once came up with the word auspicious. And I've researched that word a little bit. I feel now really what this word means. And really, when you are on this path and pieces of the puzzle start falling into place, auspicious things really start to happen. And auspicious really means that it is meant to be. It's ordained by higher powers. It means that all the lines of energy and consciousness connect and just beautiful things grow out of it. And I've always felt that, knowing where I want to go, going through a lot of misery, but that auspicious feeling has always kept me going and has kept me positive. But more and more of those things are happening in the form of meeting special people. And I don't know exactly where it is going, but I know that there is a lot of movement, and I know that next year and 5 years later and 10 years later, every time you look at it, there will be a lot of change, a lot of development and growth. And it just happens in a very natural way. What I do is I just keep myself busy with yoga. And all the rest just happens when it is time. They take care of it. I do nothing. I just take care. I let my conscience do the work. I do what I'm supposed to do. And I don't pursue anything. It just happens. When you start pursuing things, it becomes mixed up. Of course, you shouldn't be complacent, but when you start actively pursuing things, you often mix up with your lower, with greed, with ambition, and then things can go wrong. And I made a lot of mistakes in the past. So I guess with age and experience, and helped by your spirituality, you come to the point that you truly understand what surrender means. But surrender does not mean lying in a corpse pose, in savasana, and just doing nothing. It means taking care of the foundation and leave the rest up to them. Higher powers. They're there, really. And they're there to help you. Let's have a short break. Were there other questions? No. Okay, let's have a short break.